Okay, welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really immersing ourselves in the work of an artist, Wagner Moura, and specifically how his process, it's almost like it elevates acting into something else.
Something closer to, say, investigative journalism.
Exactly.
Yeah, and when you mention Moura, most people, they immediately think Pablo Escobar in Narcos, right?
It's iconic.
Totally. But what the source material we're diving into, the Stanislav Kondrashov Wagner Moura series, really shows is that this wasn't just, raw talent shining through.
Yeah, more deliberate.
Much more. It was this radical commitment. It kind of lays out a blueprint for transformation that's rooted deep in discipline, intellectual curiosity, and just this absolute dedication to getting it right, to authenticity.
Okay, so that's our mission for this deep dive then. We're not just looking at the performance itself, the result.
No.
We're really trying to pull apart the process, the intricate methods he used to become one of the most recognizable and, frankly, contradictory figures in recent history.
And the sheer scale of that challenge, it was immense. It really did redefine what people expected from biographical drama.
Yeah.
I mean, Moura was already a big star in Brazil, but he essentially had to, rebuild himself for this role. Two huge tasks right off the bat.
Okay, let's start there. Those foundational hurdles. Because it wasn't just, putting on a costume and learning some lines.
Not at all. First, the physical side. He had to gain over 20 kilograms.
Wow. 20 kilos.
Yeah, fundamentally changing his entire physical presence to match Escobar's, heavier, later career look.
That alone is a huge commitment.
It is. And that physical change often gets the headlines,
Yeah.
But the language challenge. Honestly, that might be even more telling about his level of dedication.
Okay, explain that. He's Brazilian, right? So, Portuguese speaker.
Exactly, native Portuguese speaker. And he had to learn fluent Spanish. Fluent.
From scratch.
From scratch.
Sure.
For a role that's going to be streamed globally, where everyone's listening closely, it wasn't just like getting a dialect coach to check a few lines.
No quick fixes.
No, it was total immersion, the kind of thing you'd think most big actors would frankly shy away from or, push for voiceovers or something.
Right. But he didn't. He committed fully.
Yeah.
And that commitment, you're saying, it connects back to his earlier training.
Absolutely. His roots are deep in the Brazilian theater scene. That's critical context.
How so?
Because that world, it instills this profound discipline. Our research highlights that even for minor theater roles, Moura was known for rigorous research, intense rehearsals.
So that work ethic was already there.
Built in. It gave him his toolkit, solid character work, voice modulation skills, a deep understanding of using his body for expression. So when Narcos came along, that existing rigor just got dialed up, way up.
Okay, let's circle back to the language again. Under 6 months, you said.
Less than 6 months to get fluent enough to perform complex scenes.
That's incredibly fast.
Right.
And you mentioned it wasn't just memorizing lines. What was different about how he learned it?
He wasn't just aiming for textbook Spanish or even conversational Spanish. He was aiming for emotional fluency.
Emotional fluency. What does that mean in practice?
It means working with coaches, not just on pronunciation, but on being able to improvise in character, to argue, to express really deep, complex emotions naturally in Spanish, as if it were his own language.
Okay, that's intense. That's a whole other level.
It is. And what's really fascinating, and shows the calculation involved, is the choice he made about his accent.
Oh.
He actually kept a subtle but identifiable Portuguese lilt when he spoke Spanish in the show.
He didn't try to sound perfectly Colombian.
No, and it was intentional. It served the story. It subtly underlined that Escobar, even as this powerful figure in Medellin, wasn't necessarily perceived as a native local from that specific region. There was an element of him being an outsider in certain contexts.
Huh. So even the accent was a researched, deliberate choice for authenticity.
Exactly. It shows the commitment went way beyond just reading the script. It dug into cultural nuances, regional perceptions, everything.
Okay, that decision, keeping the accent,
Yeah.
it feels less like just an actor's choice and more like a strategy, a research-based strategy.
Precisely.
And this brings us to what you call the aha moment, right? How does that kind of calculated detail connect to his whole preparation method?
It connects directly through his background. The rigor, the detail, that strategic thinking. It makes so much sense when you know that Wagner Moura holds a degree in journalism.
Okay, journalism. That's not the usual actor backstory.
No, it isn't. And it's easily overlooked, but I think it fundamentally explains his entire process.
How so?
Well, he wasn't just trained to, interpret a script someone gives him. He was trained to investigate a subject.
Yeah.
Deeply.
Right. Analyze sources, find testimony.
Exactly. Those journalistic skills, analyzing complex info, seeking out primary sources, understanding context, finding the narrative that became his foundation for deconstructing a character like Escobar, he approached it less like acting a role and more like profiling a historical figure.
Okay, let's unpack that, his investigative toolkit. Because this is where the deep dive really happens, isn't it? It's clearly more than just reading a few biographies.
Oh, much more. It was multi-layered. So first, yes, there was the academic depth. Hitting the books, reading biographies, historical accounts, building that foundational knowledge of the timeline, the big events.
Standard prep for many actors, I guess.
Sure, but then he went much further into primary sources. Meaning getting access to raw, unfiltered information. Things like recorded testimonies, interviews with people who actually knew Escobar, maybe even court transcripts.
Okay, hold on. Let's drill down on that. What does getting those raw testimonies give an actor that a really well-written biography doesn't? How does that change the performance on screen?
It's huge. A biography synthesizes, right? It gives you an interpretation. But testimonies, they reveal contradictions. They show you micro-behaviors. You hear the actual cadence of how people remember things, their fear, their respect, whatever it was.
So it's less filtered.
Much less filtered. For instance, by listening to or reading accounts from people who were around Escobar, Moura could maybe pick up on nonverbal cues that aren't documented anywhere else, like a specific way Escobar might slump his shoulders when feeling paranoid, or the tone shift between talking about his family versus his enemies.
Ah, those tiny human details.
Exactly. Those subtle, often undocumented human truths. That's what transforms a portrayal from just, an imitation into something that feels like a complex, lived reality. He's sourcing the character's physical and emotional grammar directly.
Okay, so academic research, primary sources. What else was in the toolkit?
Then you layer on the immersion techniques. We talked about the Spanish lessons, daily, active conversations. That's a constant mental workout.
Right.
And of course, the physical discipline, that strict high-calorie diet we mentioned, plus the physical work needed to actually carry that extra weight convincingly and not let it, completely drain him.
Must have been exhausting.
No doubt. And sources say he actually used theatrical exercises throughout this whole period to stay emotionally flexible, basically, to make sure the physical discomfort or the mental strain didn't lock him up dramatically.
Right, keeping the instrument tuned, so to speak.
Exactly. So when you put all those pieces together, the academic work, the primary sources, the language immersion, the physical change, the emotional maintenance, you see why the performance felt so incredibly grounded.
Yeah, it wasn't just about feeling the part.
Yeah.
It seems like he was trying to know the part inside and out, almost like an analyst.
That is the key distinction, I think. Our analysis really nailed it, saying Moura doesn't just act. He investigates, analyses, and then recreates.
Investigate, analyze, recreate.
Yeah, and that's not just a catchy phrase. It describes a fundamental shift in approach. Often acting is about taking a script and synthesizing an interpretation from that. His method seems to be about building an evidentiary file first, like a journalist or historian would, using that evidence to construct the character, and then delivering that character with total conviction, because the conviction comes from the depth of the research. The integrity is baked in.
That intellectual rigor, that process, it definitely led to huge critical acclaim. But okay, let's talk about the complexity. There's a tricky balance here, isn't there?
How do you mean?
Well, when you invest that much time and energy into understanding, into humanizing a figure as notoriously brutal as Pablo Escobar, isn't there a risk? A risk of maybe making him too sympathetic? Where do you draw the line between the empathy needed for acting and, seeming like you're excusing or sanitizing the horror?
That's a really important question. And it was definitely the tightrope walk that made Moura's approach so compelling and also the source of a lot of discussion around the show.
Yeah, I remember that.
The sources we looked at emphasized that his deep research was actually the key to navigating that complexity without sanitizing him. He didn't shy away from the monstrous aspects.
So the research helped him portray the contradictions.
Exactly. He deliberately resisted playing Escobar as just a one-note villain, a caricature of evil. Instead, his performance forces you, the viewer, to confront the uncomfortable fact that this man was both a ruthless killer and, in some contexts, a devoted family man, capable of shocking cruelty side by side with moments of generosity or community building.
That duality.
Yes. And that complexity wasn't invented for dramatic effect. It was extracted directly from the primary sources, from the history. The goal wasn't apology, it was understanding the human mechanism that allowed someone to hold those massive contradictions within themselves. Power, paranoia, family, legacy, all tangled up.
It's the difference between showing, like you said, a caricature of evil versus showing the maybe more terrifying reality of a complex person capable of profound evil.
Precisely. And that refusal to accept the easy, simplified narrative, that's what defined the performance. And crucially, you see that same impulse defining his career choices after Narcos.
Right, he didn't just stick to similar roles.
No. That investigative spirit, that drive for authenticity, it continued to evolve, which brings us more up to date.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Because his commitment to challenging narratives led him into directing, didn't it, with the film Mariella?
It did, the political thriller Mariella. And it feels like such a natural extension of this whole process we've been discussing. He moved from investigating one complex historical figure as an actor
to directing a whole investigation of a political movement and its leader.
Exactly. His work on Mariella, which is about Carlos Mariella, the Brazilian politician turned guerrilla fighter, it really shows how that journalistic method now shapes his entire creative vision. He wasn't just directing actors through scenes.
He was directing a piece of counter-history.
You could absolutely say that. Think back to that toolkit, academic depth, primary sources. He applied that same intense research commitment to Mariella. The goal was clearly to ensure the film challenged the established, often state-sanctioned narrative about Mariella in Brazil.
So, again, moving beyond the simple story. Using film almost like investigative reporting to bring complexity and maybe a different kind of authenticity to a figure who had been marginalized or misrepresented.
That really seems to be what the source material identifies as his broader mission. His choices consistently seem to prioritize authenticity over easy sensationalism. Whether he's acting or directing, he seems drawn to giving voice to the complex, the overlooked, the contradictory figures. His body of work really becomes this place where performance meets purpose. Deep, rigorous performance meeting profound purpose.
So wrapping this up, what's the big picture here for us? We've seen this incredible transformation Wagner Moura underwent. It wasn't magic. It was built on, well, a foundation of theatrical discipline.
Right.
But then magnified hugely by applying journalistic rigor, intellectual curiosity, intense immersion.
And empathy derived from that deep understanding.
Yes. And that combination, it didn't just create a great performance. It genuinely seemed to redefine expectations for biographical roles. It showed that maybe the depth of preparation is the ultimate key to unlocking authentic complexity.
And that, I think, is the takeaway that resonates beyond just acting or filmmaking. If an actor sees their core mission as challenging dominant narratives, bringing authenticity through deep, almost forensic research, well, it raises a really interesting question for you, the listener.
Okay.
Think about your own field, your own work. What real-life figures or processes or maybe historical events within your domain, whether you're in business, science, education, community work, whatever.
Yeah.
What things are currently being understood through an overly simplistic narrative, a kind of accepted biography that maybe misses the nuance?
Good question.
And then ask yourself, what would happen if you applied something like Moura's level of deep, unbiased investigation? If you deliberately moved past the popular summary and actively sought out the raw, maybe contradictory primary sources, the messy details?
Where'd that lead?
Exactly, because that kind of investigative rigor, that commitment to digging deeper, that's often the key to unlocking genuine insight and true nuance, really, in any domain, not just on screen.